Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for another installment of the research webinar series hosted by our team here at the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute, or MVLRI. The goal of MVLRI is to expand Michigan's capacity to support new learning models, engage in active research to inform new policies in online and blended learning, and strengthen the state's infrastructures for sharing best practices. MVLRI is a division of MVU, or the Michigan Virtual University, a nonprofit organization whose mission is advancing K-12 education through digital learning, research, innovation, policy, and partnerships. MVU is also the parent company of Michigan Virtual School, a supplemental state-sponsored virtual school, Michigan LearnPort, an online professional development portal for K-12 educators and personnel, and MyBlend, a blended learning initiative providing K-12 schools with resources, products, and services to personalize learning options for their students and improve student achievement. Today's presentation is the second in our multi-part series on mentoring online learners called Mentors Making Online Learning Work. The series will consist of multiple webinars spread across the next 5 or so months, so be sure to check our webinars page, which we'll share at the end of the webinar, to find topics and exact dates as they are announced. Today's presentation will be an introduction to research and best practices, and as well as an introduction to our mentor orientation and training module. Our first presenter is one of our own fellows at MVLRI, Dr. Jared Borup. Jared is an assistant professor in the Division of Learning Technologies at George Mason University. He earned his PhD in Instructional Psychology and Technology from Brigham Young University in 2013. Previous to earning his PhD, Jared taught history at a junior high school for 6 years. He has taught online and blended courses since 2008. In his current position, he is working to build the integration of online learning in schools master's and certificate program, which began its first cohort in fall 2014. He recently served as a fellow for George Mason's Office of Distance Education and led an initiative that prepared faculty for the challenges of online instruction. His current research interests include developing online learning communities and identifying support systems that adolescent learners require to be successful in online environments. We also have Julie Howe, who has been the online learning coordinator at Three Rivers High School for the past 6 years. 2 years ago, they expanded their program with the addition of 3 online classroom coordinators/mentors in the high school. This fall, they began their program at the middle school with 2 online classroom mentors. The program has averaged a 95% student success rate over the last 6 years and was recognized during the 2012-2013 school year for their high level of student performance. The 2013-14 online students had a 97% success rate due to the caring support of well-trained mentors. Three Rivers Mentors' goal is to provide innovative educational opportunities to meet the students' diverse learning styles. Their mission is to provide personalized and engaging learning experiences for all students. Lastly, we have our own Rebecca Stimson. Rebecca joined MVU as proposal and content writer for the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute in 2012. Rebecca has English education credentials and a BA in Urban Development-Urban Education from Michigan State University. In addition, she earned an MA in Educational Policy Studies from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She taught personalized developmental reading and writing at Lansing Community College for 6 years and has over 25 years of experience writing and editing for a variety of audiences. With that, I believe I'll hand it over to Rebecca to start us off.
Thanks, Justin. Welcome, everyone. I'm curious about whether or not any of the participants are mentors. Can you just note in the chat box if you're mentors? And actually just note what it is that you do related to online learning. You can see from this slide, in terms of what our focus is in mentoring in Michigan, we have a goal from the Michigan Virtual Learning Research Institute to maximize student learning and outcomes. We know that all virtual schools are looking for strategies of this nature. The Michigan Virtual School courses meet a very high degree of consistency across teachers and across courses and even across sections of the same course. But despite having these variables fairly constant, student results can vary greatly. We know that many of the factors are outside the control of the virtual teacher. For example, student selection for online learning and local support strategies. So those things are also known to have great variability. For these reasons, MVU is working to identify and share best practices in these areas as another strategy to improve student performance. As we went about identifying best practices for student readiness and local support strategies, it was clear that the field was missing these practical resources for help in this area. We also have the experience of gathering information from our customer service department, feedback from people who use Michigan Virtual School courses in terms of what they need for support. We've gathered information from surveys that have been done with the field, as well as on site in a symposium that we held in 2013. People really asking for more resources, for more training. A lot of people don't totally grasp the concept of mentoring, and we do have some legislation that it requires different kinds of mentors for different circumstances. We won't go into that now, but just so that you know, those of you who are not from Michigan, and I see that there are a couple of you, thank you for joining us, who are not Michigan natives. So there are those stipulations that about who is an appropriate mentor for specific kinds of virtual learning. So as I say, we know that there's a void in this area, and we are responding to that request from the field, whether they are an MVS customer or not. So in part to fill this gap, MVU worked to publish the Parent Guide and Mentor Fundamentals, a guide to mentoring online learners, both of which are available for free download in our toolkit at mycourses.org, and I'm going to add those links to the chat box as soon as I pass this on to Jared, who will be speaking with you next. As part of the Mentor Fundamentals work, that's the guide for mentoring, that involved incorporating information gathered from interviews with Michigan mentors for a case study project. You can stay tuned for those. We hope to have those published by the end of the month. So we reached out to Dr. Jared Borup, who is a leading researcher in the area of mentoring. Because of the Mental Fundamentals work and his expertise, we asked Dr. Borup to develop the content for this training. So with that, I'm going to pass this on. Thank you. Keep the comments and questions coming in the chat box. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for everyone who's here. I know that this week can be fairly busy right in the middle of the week, so I appreciate you attending, and hopefully this is valuable. I think this cartoon really highlights a big issue in our public school system right now, and that's the on-time graduation rate. I taught 9th grade social studies, and I just knew that if I counted off my students 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, every 5th student wouldn't be there at graduation on average. And in some areas, it's much higher than that. And in one area where it can actually be significantly higher is with online learning. And as states like Michigan start requiring students to take online courses, it's something that we really need to address. So the cause of that, there's lots of things. It's complicated, but in part it's because students have an internal locus of control. If things go wrong, they don't feel like they can take charge and solve it. Younger students don't have the thinking skills or the metacognitive skills that older students have, and they don't have the self-regulation ability. So oftentimes in online courses, they have more flexibility, which can be a huge benefit to students. But the downside of that is they're not exactly good at scheduling their time and regulating themselves. So what's the solution? Well, the short answer is it's very complicated, but research has started to indicate that mentors are going to play an important part of the solution. So what is a mentor? I'll just go through this quickly, but on the left we have a teacher, on the right we have a mentor. A teacher is the content expert. They know how to assess students, they know how to present the content, they know how to tutor students with the content. and then really help students to apply their learning in meaningful ways. On the other hand, a mentor is not a content expert. They don't have the expertise to assess students, but they are very important as far as motivating students and creating relationships with students, being a communication link for them. So basically, they make sure that things are going well in the course and that the students' needs are being met, and when they're not, they can contact the teacher who is a content expert. So lots of people have been using mentors to kind of improve course outcomes, including pass rates, and they've come up with several different models. I'm going to highlight three kind of large categories of mentoring. In full-time programs, sometimes they have teachers as mentors. So similar to a homeroom class in a face-to-face environment, they'll have, so let's say the science teacher, they would have the science teacher act as a mentor to about 20 students, then the math teacher would be a mentor to another 20 students, and so forth until all of the students are covered. So that's one model. The problem with that is they don't actually share a physical space with the students, and so one problem they run up against is creating relationships. You can do that. It sometimes takes a little longer, and also students become unresponsive, and they can't necessarily know exactly what's happening outside of the course as well. So there are some limitations and benefits to this. So another model that people have gone to is the parents as mentors. So you have the online teacher, and then teachers will work with parents to make sure that parents are acting as learning coaches. Sometimes they're referred to as learning coaches, and they're mentoring their students through the course. The problem with this is parents oftentimes aren't prepared for that responsibility, and they don't have the time to really fulfill that role in a lot of cases. And sometimes they'll assume that role and then they'll fade away. So another model that we've been exploring is this on-site mentor model. So here you have a teacher, and this online teacher has students in several schools, and at each school they'll have a mentor to work with these students. And that mentor, again, doesn't have to know the content, but they have to know the course, and they have to know general pedagogy as far as motivating students and helping them to get organized. The mentor also is a communication link with parents and students and the instructor. So Harms was the first to really conceptualize this model and publish on it. She has a very helpful framework, and in there she really highlights 5 key roles that this mentor does. One is they have to understand the students. So they need to build relationships with them, and in some rural settings they already have existing relationships with the student and the family, which can be very beneficial to the online instructor and to the students learning. So also they help students develop required skills, so that could be learning skills, management skills, things like that, that support the students in learning the content. They encourage communication, act as that communication link. They monitor and motivate students. Sometimes they'll be monitoring several students at once, and they need to manage the classroom and things like that. They also cancel students on course enrollment, so sometimes online learning isn't a good fit for a student, and so they'll recommend that they take an easier course or ease into the online environment in a different way. Hannah summarized this basically saying that mentors are meant to ensure that everything is working smoothly, which I think is a great way of looking at it. There's also mentor mistakes. So a lot of times mentors don't receive professional development. I loved Abby's comment in the chat box that she was self-taught. Well, sometimes they're just tapped on the shoulder and said, okay, you're the mentor to X, Y, and Z students. And they don't really know their roles and responsibilities, and sometimes they try to act as the teacher in the course, and so they'll try to teach the content or tutor students even though they're not prepared for that. Sometimes they'll actually modify the content or timetables. This happens fairly often if let's say the mentor is an English teacher and it's an AP English course. They'll sometimes feel like the online teacher isn't doing it the right way or how they would do it, and so then they overstep the line and try to be a teacher in that way. And sometimes they can actually be openly critical to the online teacher or the online course, and when they do that, it really undermines the teacher's ability to help the student. So these are all pretty big mistakes that mentors can sometimes make, in part because they don't understand exactly what their role is. So one question that everyone has is, do mentors impact student performance? The short answer is yes. The long answer is if they have received professional development and time to fulfill their responsibilities. So sometimes administrators will have a full-time employee, and then on top of those full-time responsibilities, they'll say, okay, you are now going to be a mentor to these students, and they don't give them time to do that. And that's a mistake, because mentoring is a job, and it takes time to fulfill those responsibilities, and it takes skill. And so if they don't have those skills, you need to help them to develop it. Mentors can be especially important to at-risk students who don't have that support at home because parents are working, or they don't have the ability to put in the time that they need to. I love this saying that facilitators are made, not born. And unfortunately, some research has indicated that most facilitators or most mentors don't receive the training or professional development they need to be effective. So that brings us to Julie, and she's going to highlight some of the things that she's been doing at Three Rivers.
Hi, welcome. Justin did such a nice job with the intro. I was just going to kind of highlight that we started with online learning at a very limited program in 2002-2003 school year, and our goal was to provide innovative educational opportunities to meet the different needs of our students, which included scheduling, conflicts, learning style. We wanted to be able to provide personalized learning. We expanded that in 2008, and then in 2012 and 13, we hired additional mentors. And then this past year, we have 2 more new mentors at the middle school. We've been recognized as partners in innovation and performance recognition for our students' performance in their online courses. Our mentor training is a big part of our success, and we would not have that without the time and support of our administration. I think for us, the important part too, there's another small piece about making sure we have the right mentor. We have a pretty extensive interview process, and we usually try to hold that in June if we need a mentor. And then we hold our training in August, a few weeks before school starts. And that includes an orientation process, reviews of our success and our programs and our goals, making sure mentors know the reasons why we are here, that we're not just monitors, we're mentoring. These kids have scheduling conflicts. Our school is small. We can't offer every course that we would like to, but we can offer them via online learning. It's more or less the why of what we do. Our orientation then goes into our student information system, Power School, Power Teacher, attendance, gradebook, data, making sure that they can access the data. We've been very fortunate in that we were able to hire 2 former substitutes in the district. They knew the kids and they were familiar with our SIS system, and we found that that really facilitated the training process. We then make sure that they're familiar with all our online providers and they have all the content information. My 3-inch binder has now become a major Google Drive document and folder where we share all the information. Our mentors do print it. They like to have it next to them, and that seems to work well. We go from there to enrollment methods for the online providers. We want the mentors to be responsible for their students and to learn the different courses that are available. We also tried to do a learning management system demo. Our major provider uses Blackboard. Sometimes we're able to do that just with screenshots. It seems to help. And then if we're able to get access to the syllabus or the content, we'd like our mentors to be familiar with the syllabus or the pacing guide and the content. They are not content experts, but the familiarity helps them as they're working with their students. We then go to a training for organization, and that includes using shared Google Docs in their Google Drive. We stress maintaining accurate records so that we have the data we need for analysis when we're done. One of our biggest and most time-consuming training is communication, and using examples and scenarios that we've had over the past few years. Communication in the example of emails to parents and students. Working on building a relationship with our online instructors. Our online instructors are very critical to student success, and our relationship with them is very important. We have to make sure that we communicate with them if there's a need for accommodations or IEPs, 504s, questions about course content, so we can maybe help interpret an assignment or an assessment for a student. Making sure we get off to a good start. I think it's really a nice timing to have this webinar as we're kicking off. We're now starting our third week of the second semester, and it really is a nice time to put the emphasis on how important it is for our mentors to make sure our students get off to a good start. And we've been meeting about that just to make sure that we're sharing best practices and concerns. We also go over FERPA and the importance of confidentiality. Some of our mentors maybe have not had the experience of being in the classroom, and we wanted to make sure, or they have limited experience, and we want to make sure that is covered. Our next emphasis is on technology. We have a great tech team, plenty of support, but just to make sure, when I say technology, it's to make sure that our mentors know how to get the help that they need, which would include the help desk for our provider, the help desk for our school. We also use LAN School in the lab so that we can monitor student keystroke and internet access. And then we also need to make sure that we have the resources and the technology in place for some special courses. For example, we have a video game design, and we need to make sure that we have the software and that the mentor is familiar with the functioning of the software. It seems to make it much nicer for the kids. The mentor is by no means an expert, but it's kind of nice. The kids appreciate having that real-time support if there's a little glitch. We do work collectively to create classroom and lab expectations. We all share the same document. We edit it together so that there's consistency from one lab to another. Some of our students have more than one mentor. So it's really helpful to have that consistency from classroom to classroom. But at the same time, we have 3 very different personalities. So that also is kind of nice for the kids, that we have shared expectations, but then different personalities. We have a very important first week of lessons of how we do an orientation for the students, and we go over that extensively with our mentors. We give them sample pacing guides to show how the courses are structured. We go over grading policies, and we focus on the mentor building the relationship with the student from the very beginning. It's important to get to know our students, know why they're in the classroom, Why are they learning online? And for that, to help us with that, we have a survey that we use, as well as we take time. We try to get the conferencing in early, the first week, to make sure that there's a good fit, that the student is in the right class. We probably do a lot more counseling that first week than we care to admit, but we want to make sure that the kids are in the right course, the right situation for the right reason. Part of our survey includes questions regarding technology at home, so we can plan accordingly. Are we going to need to provide extra support after school? What is the student's home situation as far as, you know, we've already had 3 snow days in addition, and it's been really nice that many of our students do have the luxury of having internet and a computer at home. We also check for first-time online learner readiness. Our mentors are, we are asked to identify our first-time online learners so we can give them the extra support that we need. Sometimes for the new student, they're the quiet student who just sits there and you think, okay, everything's going fine, until maybe a day or two you realize they haven't really even introduced themselves to their online instructor. We are very fortunate in that we have weekly PLCs on Monday. We've had to do some PD as well, so unfortunately our PLCs are usually now 2 or 3 meetings per month, but it's critical. We identify as a group of mentors, we identify at-risk students or students we have concerns. And this is especially important for us coming up this next Monday to make sure that we have the students in the right course, or we've noticed issues, to consult with other mentors to see if maybe they had a shared experience. There's a lot of counseling going on. There are a lot of new classes too. We're reviewing content, making sure we're familiar with the pacing and that all the pacing guides are in place. And when I say content, it's more to make sure that we have the resources in place. Is there an e-textbook? Does the student need a password? Kind of just all the general troubleshooting to keep everyone moving forward. And I think one of the most difficult things at this time is our experienced online learners kind of just take off and fly. And it's our newbies that need a little more support, but they're a little reluctant to ask for it. So we keep very close observations and communications, both with students, families, the counseling department as well. And then we make sure that we share our best practices every week. I know some of our mentors have come up with really nice ideas in the Google Drive and our shared documents of things that we can do maybe a little more efficiently, some extra surveys or some ways that we can document what we're doing, and always we look for continuous improvement. We were very fortunate that we were able to host our first training for our mentors. We were given about 20 to 24 hours over a period of 5 days, 6 days, and that also included time for enrolling the students into their online courses. And we did that collectively, and we did that again just at the end of our first semester. We had a half-day workday. We worked as a team to kind of review what courses students were in and enroll them and make sure we had a good balance and a good fit for everyone. And that, I think, has made a big difference for us. And I think we're happy to share this survey. Yeah, only 3 snow days. Yeah, we were pretty lucky. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. So when I joined the team to work on this mentoring guide, Rebecca had already spoken to Julie and as well as mentors across Michigan and interviewed them and really found some great information, some rich information of how mentors are doing, what they're doing to benefit students. And I think you got a sense of that with what Julie was describing there. And so what Rebecca did was she led a group to create the Mentoring of Online Learning guide. And it looked like some of you might be familiar with that from the chat box earlier. But it's a great resource to kind of help mentors to understand their roles and get some best strategies and some resources, including surveys and things like that, to really fulfill their responsibilities. So then what we wanted to do, and what I was asked to kind of take the lead on, was creating an online module that would complement this this mentoring guide. So we had some constraints that we had to work under. So one is we wanted it to be under an hour, the time that it would take them to go through, under an hour. We wanted it to be highly flexible and on demand. And as a result of that, we couldn't have mentors interacting with each other. Some professional development has had a lot of success with that, and we couldn't do that here, but we knew that later on there would be a website that would allow for that in Michigan. We did want to have some sort of assessments on here, and with automated feedback at least, to kind of really self-assessments for the mentors to know if they're grasping the concepts. And we also, because of the interviews that Rebecca had done before, we really wanted some authentic scenarios, and then include the voice of practicing mentors, how they would respond to those scenarios, and also give some advice to new mentors on what they should look out for, and some difficulties that they might come across, and some ways to fulfill their responsibilities. So what we came up with was 5 units. The first unit really was an introduction to online learning, some of the trends, how is online learning different from face-to-face instruction. The second module was understanding the team. So what is the role of the online teacher? What is the role of the mentor? How are they different? How can parents support students? And what is the student responsible for? Then in module 3, we had a module for understanding the online environment. So in here we talked about, what is an LMS? What does an LMS look like? And we included some screenshots and things to look for in the LMS. Also a little bit about netiquette. How can you help students to communicate effectively? And then in module 4 and 5, this is where we had a Google Hangout with Julie and her team at Three Rivers, and we compiled some videos to try to show some best practices from that. So you can access the mentoring module here. I think Justin's going to type it in the chat box for you. So there you go. So basically, the content, a lot of the content was similar to the mentoring guide, a little more interactive. We do have some multimedia elements and some images to try to help them conceptualize the model that they'll be working under, similar to the images that I showed you earlier. We also had some assessments for them, some examples. So for instance, in this screenshot on the bottom left is an example of a student email, and then we highlight ways that netiquette could be improved. And so they can click on that and learn more. All those green circles, they can click on that and learn more about why that's kind of an issue in the online environment. So we had more flexibility on the examples that we provided. And then again, we had advice from actual mentors in the field. So we did about a 90-minute Google Hangout with Julie. This is Julie's smiling face there, and along with 4 other mentors on her team. 2 were very experienced, including Julie, and then the other 3 were in their first year mentoring. So we tried to get lots of different perspectives there. And then what we did was we took that 90 minutes and we got some really rich information. It was a great experience to hear their voice and the examples that they were sharing, just some great examples of what mentoring is and what it looks like. And so we narrowed that down to 10 videos. That's actually more videos than we thought. They're all relatively short, about 2 to 3 minutes. And we have 6 that's just kind of advice. So we grouped all the different comments on a certain topic together. For instance, what's the hardest part about being a new mentor? How do you help students to stay on pace and things like that? And then we also had them respond to 4 scenarios that were realistic, and I'll show you an example of that here in a minute. So I'm going to show you 2 examples. The first one is of a scenario, and in the video it'll say what the scenario is, and then you'll see the response that's given. And then the second one is we asked them, what's the hardest part about being a mentor or a new mentor?
I actually have had this situation many times. About a month in, you do get to see what kind of workers your kids are. And if about a month in, at 60%, I would assume a couple of things. If I knew that she was really academically ready for this course, I would first check to see if maybe she's having some trouble still navigating the course. Some of the courses are a little bit more difficult than others. And so I'd probably sit down with her to see what assignment she needs to be working on and have her show me how she's going through it. Maybe she's missing out on some key components that she needs to be using and just isn't figuring out how to get there. Also, sometimes just one assignment will trip up a student. And if they can't get past that assignment, it can really hang them up. And maybe she's been working on the same assignment, and you know, some students aren't as good at asking for help. So I would probably try to discreetly find out whether she's having an issue maybe with one assignment or a couple of them. It's easy to look at their grade page in on Blackboard, and you know, I could see when the last time she turned something in was, and I can see when she was in there, and I could see maybe if she's really struggling with something. Also, I'd talk to her a little bit about how important it is to stay on pace, because staying on pace makes a big difference in how a student's going to, you know, end in the course. I talk a lot about staying on pace, trying to get a little bit ahead of pace, because I know kids, she may not think that 60% is a big deal right now at a month in, because a lot of kids, that's another thing. They kind of feel like, well, you know, I've got all this time and I'll be able to catch up, and you know, I'll be fine. Well, they don't always realize how quickly time goes by. And I'm like the mom in here that has to remind them that you got to move along. And so I talk a lot about with students that are kind of not making a lot of progress early on. I talk a lot about how important it is to stay right on their pace guide and even to get ahead. If I don't see that Amber was making progress after that, after trying to figure out maybe what was holding her up, or after trying to push her along and keep her on pace, I'd probably call parents, because that's sometimes the single easiest way to get a kid moving. Is as long as their kid or their parents know about it. A lot of times they don't know. And so once they get a heads up that their student isn't working, because you know, most of the time when I call, mom or dad will say, oh, well, Amber says she's right on pace and doing great. And it's not that Amber's trying to, you know, pull one over on them. Well, maybe she is, but that's just natural for teenagers, I think. So calling parents often really makes a big difference. Sometimes it's a technology issue at home. Sometimes they don't have internet, or they don't have a computer at home, and we try to offer a laptop if they do have some kind of internet accessibility at home. And so sometimes kids just need a little bit of extra time on their class at home. That most Michigan virtual classes require 5 to 7 hours of work. And we offer 5 hours in a typical week. So I usually say to kids, you know, you're going to have to figure out where that extra 2 hours comes from. And hopefully this isn't the case, but, you know, occasionally we do have kids that really just have some real personal issues that are going on. That, and I actually found out about a student last Friday that's homeless. Occasionally that can be a reason too, because they have other things on their mind, and their online class kind of takes a back.
So that was one of the longer videos, but I think it's a great example of the types of information and types of things that we were hearing from these mentors on Julie's team. Just some really great examples, and you could see her at the start of the video. She said, "Oh, I have lots of Ambers," you know. So we tried to find some common issues that they had, and then have them just talk it through, and try to have that narrative there where new mentors could understand what it's really like. So I want to show you one other one. This is short. I think it's under 2 minutes, but we asked them, what's the hardest part about being a new mentor? So now you're going to hear from the new mentors.
Gosh, that's a good question. I think the hardest part is getting to know the courses and how to actually help them do their submissions, and, you know, how to contact their instructor, making them realize, you know, sometimes on the first try you might not get 100%, but we've got that option to email the instructor and say, hey, could I have another try on this one? And they've done wonderfully, but we're talking every day about where they are and what needs to be done, and making sure they're on track.
I think the toughest part for me is trying to balance the amount of students that need help. So for me, having over 120 students, I think at times certain students may kind of slip through the cracks a little bit, only because sometimes you're concentrating on a select few students who need the most amount of help, and by doing so, you may bypass other students who may have slipped and fallen past a certain point. And now you have to try to go back to that student again and see that, okay, they've already missed so many assignments these last couple of weeks, and now you have to try to catch them up as well.
So that was an example where you saw a couple more. Again, we understood that we didn't have a lot of time. We had some constraints. We wanted something that could be a standalone resource and that we could share with people in and out of Michigan. And because of that, we couldn't include a lot of the interactive elements, so we tried to create the content in a way where it felt interactive. And so one way we did that is before they hear the experienced mentor respond to a scenario, they would actually type out a response. Now, no one is going to go and maybe someone would, but whether they get feedback from an expert or not, by kind of normalizing their response to what the experienced mentor says, we felt could be a very valuable experience for them. So with that, I'll turn the time.
Thank you, Jared. Thanks for sharing a little bit about the module itself. We're really excited. So we do encourage you folks who are here today to actually go through that module, offer some feedback. There are links within the player and within that landing page that I posted where you can submit a Google form to give us feedback and suggestions for improvement, because we think it'll definitely be a valuable resource for folks who are out there in the field. So basically the future directions that we wanted to touch upon, some of the things that we are really excited about developing further as MVLRI continues to engage with the research on mentoring, with mentors themselves, as we continue to see just how much of an impact they have on student achievement. We've decided as an organization to dedicate more resources, to dedicate more time to actually cultivating that community. Part of that effort will be to create a mentor website to provide ongoing support for mentors regardless of the vendor. So this is not a project out of the Michigan Virtual School. This is coming from Michigan Virtual University as a capacity building mechanism to help folks who are out there in the field. That website providing ongoing support will be kind of a one-stop shop for all of the resources that we've shared here today and ones that we're currently developing, as well as a place that we can provide a community of support for those who are doing the work. Our goal is, again, to set up that website, get this running through the spring, build up a following of practitioners so that we have folks engaging with one another, sharing ideas, sharing their actual results from implementing ideas from the resources and touching on some of the research that backs up those practices. So we're excited to join in that effort. If you have any questions or you're would like to get in contact with us about that effort, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be sharing our contact information at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll hand it over to Becky to talk about the resources that we've already published thus far.
Thanks, Justin. I wanted to answer, I was in the midst of responding to Diana in the chat box, and I'll just answer you live, Diana. We have the February webinars posted on the MVLRI.org webpage under webinars. We do have a list of upcoming webinars for the next several months, which I can certainly email to you if you wanted to attach your email. And I'd be happy to email that to you and to anyone else who's interested. Again, those are kind of, some of those dates are set and some are not, but the content is pretty well determined. So so glad that you are interested and so glad to have you here. Please share the information with others that you think might be interested. So to the resources, we've spoken a lot about Mentor Fundamentals, the guide for mentoring online learners, and I just have to say again, I can't say it often enough, that really is the product of the work of the 14 people that I interviewed for the case studies that we're doing about mentor programs across Michigan. It is full of the absolute gospel from the folks that are doing the work. And those places are noted in the guide as well, the things that come directly from the mentors. The mentor orientation module you see coming soon, Justin posted that link. It is in the beta phase, so we really want feedback from everyone. Please don't hold back. There's, I believe, an email address that's probably on every page in the frame, and then we, I think, Justin, you can verify this. Is there another document, a survey, I think?
I can post the direct link to the survey, but that survey is linked to from the landing page for the module, as well as the player where the module sits in the top right corner. There's an offer feedback button.
So please don't, as I say, don't hold back. We are responding to the needs that are expressed by the people in the field, whether they're MVS customers or not. So please don't, as I say, don't hold back. And then there is the parent guide to online learning, and that is again just from the folks who do the work. That involved interviewing a lot of customer service people and our teachers here at MVU, but all of the resources that we produce are meant to be agnostic. They are not direct reflections of what we do at MVU through our Michigan Virtual School. They're intended to be able to be used by everyone, no matter who the provider is of your online courses. Then the Toolkit resources, the 21F is legislation that we have had passed here in Michigan that makes it easier for students who have wanted to take online courses who have been prohibited for some reason by their school. This makes, it provides some framework for whether or not the school will provide it. For example, if the student has failed the same course face-to-face, they don't have to let the student take the course online, but it opens online learning up for everyone across the state, and was altered this year. This is the second year. It was altered this school year to allow students to take up to 2 classes with parental consent. Parents are very much involved in the decision about whether or not students, and guardians, about whether or not students take online courses. And then you'll see the link there to Mrs. Howe's class. It's a great website which has a lot of resources for mentors. Julie, do you want to say anything more about your website? We're just so happy to have you, Julie, as a resource, and Jared as well. It's just remarkable and amazing work, and we are happy to be able to share it with folks. Justin, back to you.
Great, thank you. So, yep, we are in the stage of wrapping up here, so if anyone has any questions or comments, please shoot them through the chat window there. We'd be happy to answer them before we wrap up. We've got a ton of email addresses there in the chat window by now. The email addresses for our presenters are posted here, so if you've got specific questions that might require a little bit further follow-up, please reach out to our presenters. They'd be happy to hear from you. We wanted to make mention of a couple other things, a couple other projects that MVLRI has our hands in at the moment. We have been asked to host the online and blended learning research community meeting before or in the run-up to the INACOL Blended and Online Learning Symposium, November 8th, 2015, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., an all-day meeting. So we're attempting to get the word out soon, sooner rather than later, and we are hoping that folks might have some ideas, would like to participate in some of the planning meetings for our event. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. We'll be posting our general email address at the end of this webinar. We also want to point to one of our latest projects that we've been working on. It's our Virtual Viewpoints podcast. It's a podcast series that we've created designed to amplify the voices of those in the K-12 online and blended learning sphere, demonstrating the power of applicable research. So we'll be sitting down with practitioners, policymakers, administrators, researchers, and others who want to share their stories with the growing community through some brief one-on-one interviews. So if you're check out the URL, listen to our
Justin, we're having a really hard time hearing you. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's some. I thought it was just me, but there are obviously others who are having a really hard time hearing you. Can you adjust your mic?
How about now?
Excellent. Thanks.
Good. No problem. Sorry about that. So we'd encourage you to check out our Virtual Viewpoints podcast. Go to that URL there, take a listen to our very first episode. Again, designed to amplify the voices of those in K-12 and online blended learning. Short one-on-one interviews with practitioners, policymakers, administrators, researchers, others in the field. Want to encourage that kind of collaboration between those of us in the field who are doing similar work. Also, if you're interested in being a guest or a participant on the podcast, please reach out to me. I'll post my email address in the chat window. And then lastly, just another little advertisement for our next upcoming webinar. We'll be hosting Justin Baer and Eric Kramer. Justin Baer from REL Appalachia and Eric Kramer, who is the report co-author of a specific report that they'll be covering on online and distance learning in Southwest Tennessee, the implementation and challenges that they faced. We'll be hosting that webinar next Wednesday, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, February 11th, so we look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, if you're interested in providing us with some constructive feedback on the webinar process or any of our projects, please, we do encourage you to reach out to us, mvlri@mivu.org. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Our handles are listed there on the slide. Our LinkedIn page as well. You can see the recordings of our webinars on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/mvlri1. And I posted the link in the chat window there to our upcoming webinars, as well as our archived webinars, so you can get a description about some of the webinars that we've held in the past. So we'd encourage you to check those out, see if you can find something of interest to you. With that, I want to thank everyone. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.